We've all got guts, but what role do they play in leadership? And why should we take notice on what our bellies are trying to tell us? Surely there's no leadership intelligence there, or is there? We're human, don't you know, just like you. And welcome to season 2. Leadership and ... In these episodes, we are talking leadership in all its complicated glory, the outs and the ins, and well, in today's case, probably quite literally a lot about the ins. In this episode, we're discussing guts and the brain that lives down with your belly. Joining me for this exploration into this fascinating but squishy forest is Dana Chapman. Dana's a nutritional therapist specializing in mental health through the gut-brain axis. She believes in normalizing that poor mental health is not the correct objective. It's not normal. It's a body's way of telling us that something isn't working as it should be. Now, Dana wants to shift that narrative. She wants to empower people with knowledge about how their bodies work and how to get them to work better. Now, during her transition from a Big Four consulting firm, so there's a real corporate link there, into nutritional therapy, mental health was becoming more of a topic. And Dana saw how companies were starting to bring in stuff like yoga, meditation, resilient workshops, sleep. In fact, she experienced this herself in her days at PwC. But what they weren't talking about was how to support the body from the inside out. So we're going to look a little bit about that today for leaders, but also what leaders can do ethically for their team. So welcome, Dana. It's lovely to see you.
Hello, Rachel. Thank you so much for having me on.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure. Now, Dana and I have recorded before when I was running Thought Garden, the podcast, and we had a great chat about, I think, the inner workings of diet and that sort of stuff. This is a bit different. I mean, leadership and guts. There's a couple of strings here. I think, self-care for leaders, you know, your own oxygen mask on first and all that jazz, but also that educative piece for the workforce, the teams that you're building, the teams that you're influencing, and how you can do that maybe without overstepping or becoming the food police, which obviously is quite possibly going to have the opposite effect to the one you want. What's your take on that boundary, Dana? So we'll go on to like, what leaders can do for themselves kind of in a while, but in terms of what leaders can do for others, it's a delicate balance, isn't it, between giving the information and feeling like you're dictating what they should be doing.
Yes, and I think food is a very personal choice, isn't it? We're all quite protective, I think, of what we eat and how we eat, and often that's why we find it very difficult to make a change. So you're either on a diet or you're off a diet. So I think it's a very personal choice. But I think how leaders can support their employees is through that education piece. And you can lead a horse to water, but you cannot make it drink. But what they can do is help provide an environment within the office that is supportive of employees' health rather than detrimental to it. So definitely no dictation and no dictator styles. Often people ask my husband, "Oh, what are you allowed to eat?" Which is completely not the case in our house.
Because he's married to you.
Yeah, exactly. And I always say he is able to make his own decisions on what he chooses to eat. And I think the same goes for the office and the office environment. But I think what leaders can do is be that really supportive place, have an environment within the office that is conducive to, I don't like the word healthy, but it's conducive to including foods that are great for the body and great for the brain, rather than have foods within reach that is not good for the body or for the brain.
Yeah, I suppose it's just seeing in the kind of back in the day of offices, they would get a machine to dispense chocolate bars and crisps and stuff, and the only options in that machine were chocolate bars and crisps. Now, don't get me wrong, if you really want chocolate in the afternoon on a Friday or something, you're going to find it by hook or by crook, aren't you?
Yeah.
But actually, if you think, you know, I'd actually quite fancy something kind of a bit more nutty or some fruit or something else, it's these machines would never have that kind of stuff in them. I mean, it started to shift, and obviously my background was with Danone, and they were, you know, talking about health through food. So they were quite good at having, you know, I'll get some waters and fruit in the office. But it did feel a little bit kind of on the kind of topical, or not topical, sorry, superficial in terms of what was available. And the education piece wasn't really there. It was just a, hey, look, aren't we being great? There's some free fruit for you. One thing I want to say now is slightly controversial. It caused quite a stir on a LinkedIn thread that somebody posted. It wasn't me that posted it, but I did wade in. I was probably a little bit flippant, maybe a little bit unfairly flippant when I waded in. I was just smiling because you know what's coming. I did warn you I was going to bring this up. Now, there was somebody that was suggesting quite overzealously in my book about banning cakes in the office. This whole thing about buying cakes on your birthday and bringing them in, and that it was basically, you know, really unfair to anyone that's trying to eat healthily because, you know, they would be exposed to all this temptation and all the rest of it, and also, you know, that peer pressure to go on, have a slice, have a slice, have a slice.
Yeah.
And it was very, she likened it to smoking. Smoking's been banned from offices, so therefore cake should, because it's just as bad for you. Well, cake's not going to give you cancer necessarily. Obviously, if you eat way too much of it over a long period, maybe there's a link between, you know, saturated fats and processed foods and some sort of cancers, but it's not quite as obvious as inhaling smoke. Yeah. I made a very flippant comment about not inhaling secondhand cake. That was taken, and probably quite rightly, with some indignancy, but at the same time, I'm a very much in that everything in moderation kind of girl. Is like, if it's somebody's birthday and they want to bring in cake and you want to have a piece of damn cake.
Yeah.
If the rest of your diet is balanced and okay, it is not going to kill you. Sugar is not toxic in terms of being a poison. And then there's lots of, you know, these Instagram and TikTok gurus saying sugar's toxic.
Yeah.
It's a natural product, isn't it, at the end of the day? But I do get, actually, if you are in that environment and you're trying to resist that kind of stuff, it probably doesn't help if it's very regular and very obvious and very big. So a bit controversial, definitely something that was, people were getting quite passionate about, which was hilarious because it's cake. What's your stance on that? What was your initial reaction when you heard that, as it being likened to smoking? And what's the more reflective version of your
well, actually, my first response, or my first thought, was that's the thing that we talk about in schools, like the school that my children are at. We're trying to ban cakes there because often they get dessert at school and then they get a cake when they walk out. So in that instance, then maybe it's called for and it's warranted. But
never got cake at school. I mean, you got pudding. They were awful, but you got puddings. You never got cake as well.
Well, exactly. But this is my point. These days, you're getting dessert after school lunch, and then it's somebody's birthday. So then there's a cake at the end of the day as well. And some parents bring it in as well. So, well, anyway, let's not get into that topic because that could be a whole different conversation in and of itself.
We're going to piss a lot of parents off if we're not.
Yeah. But I think it's, again, that autocratic. Nobody wants to be told what to eat. The cake can be there. Whether it gets eaten or not is a different story. I know some organizations today who still do like treat Tuesdays. So on a Tuesday, a partner will bring in donuts, cakes, sweets, etc. And it kind of apparently stays on the shelves all day, and then it comes to like 4 or 5 o'clock when people should be going home but know that they're staring down the barrel of another 4 or 5 hours of work, and that's when all of that kind of food gets demolished. So I am all for moderation. I'm all for people choosing what they should eat and when they should eat it. But again, it comes down to the education piece. If you know what that cake might be doing to you, you might think twice before having a slice.
You might think twice about the size of your slice. That's the other thing, isn't it? You might just have a small piece rather than... Yeah,
exactly. And I'm completely an advocate for the whole 80-20. So if 80% of the time you're feeding your body food that is full of nutrients that's going to support both your gut health, your mental health, and your overall body function, then 20% of the time that piece of cake is not going to derail you. It is not like secondhand smoking. I completely agree, because nobody puts your nose to it and forces you to eat it, right?
Genuinely.
I know some people find it really, really difficult to resist the temptation, but then, you know, go sit somewhere else where the cake isn't about. Don't go into the tea room if that's where the cake is standing, you know?
If leaders,
that temptation.
if leaders are talking to teams about being empathetic to those that, you know, want to try and resist the cake or the chocolates or whatever's being brought in, it's don't have it right out on the desk in the middle of an open plan office. Put it somewhere slightly more discreet so that folks can go and still help themselves to it.
Yeah.
But A, it's an effort to go and find it and get it, and
Yeah.
B, it's not in line of sight. Because
Yeah.
I remembered our lovely open plan office at Down with beautiful offices. They spent a lot of money on making them all swish and open plan. All stuff. I hated the open plan, by the way, because I was in HR. We needed doors. I'm going to stop there. But we had these rounded ends to all the banks of desks and things. And that was the place that, as everyone was walking past, the cakes were displayed on and were out there. And as you're walking past, the temptation just to, just have a little one. And it's tricky, isn't it? Because willpower is such a, particularly when you're stressed, particularly when you're having a tough day. The thing you described, you know, late, and you know you're going to be staying on for 2 or 3 hours past home time.
Yeah.
And there's donuts. Oh, well, I deserve this because.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So what can leaders do to support individuals to understand and adjust that behavior to a point where it's not dictatorial, but it is encouraging that level of awareness and maybe empathetic behavior, to be a bit more considerate, I suppose, to people's, I think, desire to make the right choices, because quite often we all really want to, and then for some reason, peer pressure or just weakness or just, you know, whether that having a crap day and I want something nice.
Yeah.
If it's there and it's obvious, you're more likely to grab it. So how would you say leaders can best kind of educate in that space? So the choices are being made from a position of more knowledge.
Yeah.
But also supporting that behavioral shift, the habit shift.
I think it comes down to education, and this is the space that I love working in. I find it's easier to make a change when you know the reason why you need to make the change. And again, lots of people say, oh, you should eat this, you should eat that, you should exercise in this way, you should exercise in that way, you should sleep this way, you should sleep that way. We all don't really know the reason why. Why should we eat in a certain way? Why has the government set the fruit and vegetable intake at 5 a day? So it's the why piece. And lots of organizations have got these amazing platforms where there's loads of recipes, there's loads of exercises, and it's great to have all of those resources. But if you don't have that education piece up front, the reason why you should be making those meals, then you kind of don't really have the motivation or the longevity of it. So it's great to try them out. It might not make you feel immediately different. It might not. But how do you keep on that track? And that's where the education piece comes in. And this is the work that I do. So it's educating about how the body works. If you want mental health, if you want good mental health, and be that good mental function, so cognitive function as well, if you want to sit down at your desk every day and be completely present in body and mind, you need to be feeding your brain nutrients. You need to have fats. So the brain is 60% fat. So you need to be feeding your brain the correct amount of fats. You need to be getting in those vitamins and minerals that help prevent toxicity within the body, because that toxicity always goes up to the brain and can lead to neurodegenerative diseases. And those are on the rise these days. So here I'm talking about Parkinson's, dementia, and Alzheimer's. So how can you feed your body and your brain so that it works effectively? Comes from knowing what foods help feed your body and brain. And I think that's sort of how you educate, so that the other resources that you have within the office, so no machines where you can get chocolate bars, but probably having machines that have got water and things like nuts or energy bars or protein bars or something like that, or having a canteen that serves amazing food, or having those resources where you've got exercises and recipes so people know why they're doing it.
Yeah, and it's that thing, isn't it? As organizations saying you can bring what you like to eat because no one's going to police what you eat. But if we're providing food, we're going to provide food that is better fuel for the body than of these other hyper processed things. I was just thinking actually when you were talking about that, it's this education piece, and I think this is where it probably fell a little bit flat where I was. There was some lunch and learns and stuff, and you had to kind of go along and you'd listen to nutritionists talking, that kind of thing, or some of the dietitians were talking, and you'd get a handful of people show up.
Yeah,
they were normally the same handful of people you'd see in the gym on a Friday because they had a little gym on site, and the same people you see going for a run at lunchtime, that kind of thing. So they were very conscious of body, brain, and all the rest of it. It wasn't a lot of the others. So maybe you were seeing 5% of the office population going along to these things and actively participating. You weren't seeing everybody else, and it was almost like the sales job wasn't done. Like you say, you've got to give them the why, but the why needs to be kind of in the same way as we do with sales and marketing. What's in it for me, that individual? What is in it for that individual? And it's about feeling better, having more energy, feeling more focused, going home still feeling energetic and being able to play with the kids when you get home, or wanting to go and play sports after work, you having the energy and not feeling completely kind of drained at the end of a working day. No, you'll have up days and down days, but over a course of time, the average day will be much better if you're fueled in the right way. In the same way as if you had a really good car or a really good motorbike or something, or a horse or whatever, you would make sure you gave it really great food, and yet we don't turn that back on ourselves as humans. We don't look at ourselves as, we give our dogs, most of us give our dogs really good quality food. I know I'm very conscious about protein levels and grain levels and stuff for my dogs. I've seen the impact. If I give them the wrong food, it's not pleasant. I've worked with horses, and competition horses, you have to give them the right measure of, we took a joke about oats, but they do make them incredibly fizzy if you give too much, and when you've got a mare who's going to just weaning a foal, you basically take her food down to next to nothing because you don't want her overproducing more milk and all the rest of it. And horses on rest don't need anywhere near the energy as horses that are working. So you're constantly adjusting as humans, unless you're an athlete or you're very into this. We don't do that. We don't say, actually, today I'm going to be working really hard and climbing a mountain. Great, you're going to plan it, right? Everyday work, everyday stuff. Don't think, what will best fuel me for this week, for this task, for what I do. We tend to kind of think about it afterwards and say, oh, I've just done I've done a bit of extra walking today, I've done a bit of extra this, and in my head, and I am absolutely guilty of this, I go, that's good, I'm going to treat myself and have. and I think about the logic of it, having something sweet or chocolatey or highly processed, which tastes amazing, don't get me wrong, I love it, isn't in my brain it's a treat. To my body, it's like, oh god. And to be fair, afterwards I feel kind of leaden and crap, and I wish I hadn't eaten. But at the time, I'm like, I deserve this. I'm really enjoying it. It's just, it's that logic, isn't it?
Those highly processed foods actually give us a very short serotonin boost.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's what draws us back. And often, if somebody is stressed, their body is producing a lot more cortisol. And if the body's producing a lot more cortisol is actually made from cholesterol. Not many people actually realize this.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So all of our hormones, actually, our sex hormones and our corticosteroid hormones are all made from cholesterol. So if you are producing a lot of cortisol, your body is saying, give me cholesterol so that I can produce more cortisol.
So you crave the fatty food.
Exactly. The fatty, the high sugar, the high fat foods. I always say it's foods that begin with C and end in E. So chocolate, cake, cookies, cheese, chocolate. I said chocolate, didn't I?
I was going to say pizza doesn't start with either of those, but it has got a lot of cheese on it. So I'm with you. Okay.
So I think it's a combination of those two things. You get the very short serotonin boost from it, so you might feel grateful while you're eating it.
Oh, not to forget the dopamine hit, that reward center kicks off as well, doesn't it? So
exactly.
I get it. It's quite, and like I say, it's a difficult thing to do, isn't it, for leaders to kind of influence. But like you say, if they've got influence about what the organization is providing, as opposed to policing, that's a start, isn't it? I think. Now, leaders themselves, though, let's kind of turn the mirror back to them. Now, I've worked for some leaders who I would say did not look after themselves. Well, highly stressed, constantly on the go, this was pre the kind of Huel days, those kind of ready-made. I mean, it's like Slim Fast, but not Slim Fast, isn't it? Really, it's like a complete meal replacement type thing. But I can see those leaders that I was working with back in the day, they would have loved that, because it was just like, well, that's an easy way for me to eat. And again, I'm not convinced that that sort of hyper-processed nutrition in a drink is the way to fuel yourself, but I don't know enough about it. I've got to be fair. I'm a bit on the fence on that one. But they would have, for them, that would have been, it's quick, it's easy, that gets me done, boom, off I go. But they were also the types that would wear the same clothes every single day, not literally the same clothes, but the same type of shirt, same type of trousers, because really efficient not to have to choose my clothing every day and all that kind of stuff. Now, I get the premise of that. I imagine that's quite liberating. It frees your brain up to focus on work. But the flip side of that, the other side of me goes, how freaking dull is that? How uncreative, how, I don't know, sort of self-dictatorial is that I'm going to wear exactly the same thing every day. I'm not expressing any character here. I'm just this person in a usually white shirt, dark trousers every bloody day. In the winter, there would be a grey jumper. And they're just like, how many grey jumpers do you own? It's literally this, your wardrobe must be just OCD central, which is, I think, I get it. I absolutely get it in terms of I'm very busy and important. But at the same time, where is the fun? Where is the joy? Where is the creativity? Where is the the kind of thing that really our brains really want to do and play with and be? It doesn't take much to add a splash of color here or there. There's not a lot of thought goes into it, does it? It's just have a different variety of colored shirts, maybe put different colors on every day rather than white. I mean, it doesn't matter which one you pick. You can give yourself a opportunity to just do it at random and live with it. But same with food, though. You could see almost every morning we go to the canteen, pick up an espresso and nothing, food wise. And you think, well, and you just think, is that A, it's not healthy, I don't think. B, you're responsible for a lot. But to do well, surely you need to be well. And there were those that did take the being well to quite serious. So they're very much in the gym first thing, and they did take fueling very seriously. Whether they did it right or not, I don't know. It's most sports drinks and stuff like that. But then if they were doing the sports, if they were doing the activities, and they did look quite fit and healthy, to be fair. But there were others that actually were the opposite. They were fry-ups, and particularly in the construction industry when I worked there. And there was some very red faces, some very kind of blotchy noses and thread veins, obesity, and difficulty getting up the stairs. And there's one chap, it was horribly embarrassing for him, but those cantilever chairs, like C shape at the bottom. He had one that literally closed down at the back when he sat in it, because it wasn't weight tested for the weight he was carrying. And then, of course, to the lads in the office, that was hilarious. They thought it was great because this thing got put on the skip like a cherry on a cake. But for him, mortifying. Must have been absolutely mortifying. And you just think, but at the same time, you'd see him stuffing down bacon and sausage baguettes every morning. He'd go to the butty van and get something massive and full of fats, full of sugars, full of breads, and every day. That's not a once a week treat. That's every day. And I think so I'm waffling now. Because I'm sort of reminiscing a bit. But what can leaders best do for themselves, and how do they access the information they need to fuel effectively leadership responsibilities, leadership attitudes, leadership kind of brain work, as it were?
Good question, and you'll have to let me know if I actually answer this, because it feels like
it's a bit of a big question. I realise that, but I think somebody has to use their brain a lot. They're stressed a lot. No, they are. No, they're maybe not stressed, but they're subject to a high level of accountability and stress. So I imagine it's a diet that needs to be almost protective. In some ways. So what would that look like? What would that look like for them?
I think firstly, we need to realize that health doesn't just come down to food, right? So yes, absolutely, we can talk about food, but we also need to be cognizant of the fact that if there is stress in the environment, that person will not be digesting their food, because when we are stressed, our digestive system shuts down. And the old saying of "you are what you eat" is not quite correct. It's "you are what you eat, digest, and absorb." So if there is stress in the picture, your digestive system is not working, you are not digesting or absorbing the nutrients from your food. And often what happens is those people end up having gut-related symptoms that just becomes the new normal for them. So they might not go to the toilet for a week, but that's their new normal, so it's okay. Or they might have, they might go to the toilet 5 times a day, but because it's happened gradually, they think that that's their new normal. So it's about, again, that education piece about how the body works. We need nutrients to support the functions that the body needs to do for us to function optimally. And this is where I like to bring nutrition in as well. So taking that workforce, taking yourself from good to great. So you are a leader, you are great, you are normally above everybody else, you are functioning above everybody else within the organization. If your diet and lifestyle supported that, you could either start doing your job amazingly well, even if it's 2 or 3% better, that's 2 or 3% better for your organization. But it's like you say, that energy and that vitality to go home and to be able to function optimally in the evening as well, not just crash on the sofa.
That's it, isn't it?
Non-present person.
Yeah, and I think it is that it's enjoying your downtime, and your downtime doesn't therefore have to be utterly restorative in terms of taking you from feeling knackered to feeling normal again.
Yeah.
It should be taking you from feeling normal to feeling great. So rather than it being something that's restorative in some ways.
And what we also need to start thinking about is not only how we're feeling today, but how we're going to feel when we're 65 or 75. Because we know that we are living longer, therefore we are going to be needing to work longer. So it's not about flogging the horse now so that I can retire at 65, because the likelihood is you won't be able to retire at 65. You'll only be able to retire at 70 or 75. And then surely you still want some vitality then. But if you're not supporting your body in the correct way now, guaranteed come 70 or 75, you're going to be starting to look at, or your family will be starting to look at old age homes because you've developed dementia or Alzheimer's or Parkinson's disease, because those are massively on the increase.
Oh, like you say, it's the later in life, there's type 2 diabetes, all the other stuff that, even if it's diet control, it kind of sucks the joy a little bit. I mean, my dad's type 2 diabetic, and basically he's trying to avoid all of the foods that give him absolute joy. And yes, he did have a tooth, and but it's tough for him, because that's probably the most cruel disease in some ways he could have got, because he kind of lived for the things he could eat, the things he could do. And I'm not saying it's any less or worse cruel than Alzheimer's, of course. I think it's a horrible, horrible disease to get. But you're right. It's, you say, not taking care of yourself at this point in time means that retirement is not going to be the one that's going off on cruises and traveling and playing golf and because you may be too decrepit to manage it.
Yeah.
There's something I saw actually on Instagram, which I really loved. And I know Instagram's kind of a hotbed of kind of gurus and God knows what else. But this lady was just saying, actually, she was talking about, you talk about beach bodies and see all this stuff about beach bodies and stuff like that. I am not looking for a beach body. I am not looking for the ideal kind of look or anything like that. I'm preparing my old lady body to be strong, to be capable, to have a decent brain, so that I have a strong phase of old ladydom. And whether that's a short phase or a long phase, I don't care, but I'm going to be strong when I get there. And I love that. I think that's absolutely brilliant. What an aspiration to have. And I think for leaders as well, it's like, why not prepare for your retirement body? Why not that a goal? If you've got financial goals, you've got business goals, why not have a personal health goal to say, my retirement body is going to be capable. It's not that I'm going to finish work and then go off slowly to kind of pass away somewhere and ramp down to. My father-in-law was in the police force, and he will talk about people. He gets the NAPO news, and the first thing he does in NAPO news is looks at the kind of the obituaries. And the amount that leave a high stress job like the force, and maybe then only live for 5 to 10 years post retirement. And they retire at 60. They're retiring at 55. They're not retiring old in my. And it's quite shocking. I mean, don't get me wrong, there's a few outliers that kind of carry on to 80, and he's in his early 70s now, so he's kind of doing okay. But you just think that's actually quite shocking, but very telling. High stress job, probably not looking at yourself because you're working funny hours, long hours, diet all over the place. When I'm talking, these people would have been working all through the 80s, 90s, and 2000s, where we didn't know a lot about the things we do know now. Now we have this gift of knowledge, more knowledge. Why not use that? So who's getting it right? Who do you think? Is there anyone kind of in the public eye you think, do you know what, they're talking the right talk about how leaders should look after themselves?
When you say that, one person comes to mind, although I'm not entirely in agreement with him, but that's Tim Spector. He has done amazing work. He's doing a massive study at the moment called the Zoe study. And I think, so I've actually been on the Zoe program myself.
Okay.
So it's about wearing a blood glucose monitor for 2 weeks, eating some delicious muffins for the first day.
I did see the video. Yes, your face with the picture.
So if you're into
they look
muffins,
wonderful.
if you're into muffins, you can do it just for day one's muffins. You get 3 for breakfast and 2 for lunch.
They look very dry.
They're not bad tasting, I have to agree, but it's so that they can control the study, right? And so that they can control how you respond, how your blood glucose levels respond to that. And then they also measure your blood fat after 8 hours, so how well you're digesting fat. And I think that is giving great information to people about how their bodies are functioning and what they should be changing so that their bodies can function a little bit better. So I think he's one of the leaders within the health and well-being space. But I think a lot of the younger generation leaders are a little bit more in tune with health and well-being. So I think those younger leaders coming through, the Stephen Bartlett's of the world, seem to really be looking after themselves, looking at diet and nutrition and how that can help support their body health, so physical health, but mental health as well. And I suppose the reason why I brought Tim Spector out is because he's focused on the gut microbiome.
I saw that.
Spoken much about the gut and the gut microbiome today, but we know that especially in mental health conditions, we know that people with a diverse gut microbiome have got much better protective mental health benefits from that. And you'll get physical health benefits from it as well, because the digestive system is important for digesting those carbohydrates. The gut bacteria is important for that blood glucose balance as well. So I kind of think those sorts of leaders are getting it right. And like you say, some leaders do set a great example because they are in the gym and they do seem to eat a really healthy diet as well. But unless you've been educated properly and gone to somebody like myself, so my qualification is nutrition science or nutritional therapy, or if you go to lifestyle medicine doctors or functional medicine doctors, they will all speak about what is important for you. And I think where we are turning to is this whole aspect of individualized nutrition. So what is good for me might not necessarily be good for you. So I might follow more of a higher fat, lower carbohydrate diet, and that works really well for me. But you might find that you feel awful on low carbohydrates, or maybe you don't digest fats well. So maybe a higher carbohydrate, lower fat diet would be better for you. So it's this whole individualized piece. What works for me, not, oh, I've read that salmon and broccoli is great for my health, so I'm going to have it every single night.
That's the easy thing, isn't it? It's like, it's almost that simplification of that process. Well, we know that broccoli is really good for us, so we're just going to eat tons of broccoli. Well, okay, but what about the other nutrients from the other vegetables, the other cruciferouses, and the other types of things that, you know, you could be eating? And I know, I think you and I did talk about kind of eating the rainbows, as many different coloured plant foods as possible, because there's all amazing array of nutrients and things that, you know, your gut really likes, and your microbiome little party over when they get it. Ferments. I know you have opened my eyes. I will say Dana and I have worked together, and she has somewhat opened eyes to ferments. I'm still on the fence with some. I can't really get my head around sauerkraut. I quite like kimchi, though, I will say, but in small doses. I don't like in lots of it. It's but I do quite happy if I go to Wagamama's. I will have a side of kimchi and go, I'm having my ferments. So, so it's there, and there is some in the fridge. So, but actually, one thing I did like about Tim Spector, he advocates for coffee, and I'm like, yay, because I am a coffee drinker.
Yes,
Black, obviously, and whole bean and all the rest of it.
Yeah,
grind your own, lovely, because let's face it, it tastes so much nicer and instant anyway. But what I actually funny you mentioned Stephen Bartlett. I think so. I've been watching some of his Diary of the CEO, and he is sponsored by Huel. And of course, there are other versions of that type of product available. I can't name them off the top of my head. That's the only one I know. What place do they have for I'm just thinking busy leaders that kind of grab it as an easy maybe single meal solution, as opposed to, I don't think anyone uses it for all of their meals, but as a meal replacement, what's your initial kind of take on that? And feel free to be controversial, because I'm quite happy for it.
Because you're not controversial at all. It's a very good question, one that I find very difficult to answer, because people like Stephen Bartlett he invested. So yes, they sponsor his podcast, but he did invest in Huel as well. It is a dietitian who is one of the founders of Huel. In short, if a leader does not have time for anything else, it is an okay supplement for a meal. You are getting vitamins and minerals in there, but remember, those vitamins and minerals are synthetic, right? So how much you actually digest and absorb of those nutrients is questionable. You will be getting some protein, you will be getting some macronutrients in as well, so your protein, carbs, and fat. And protein is very essential for the brain. Protein is very essential for mental health. So serotonin, our happy hormone, is actually made from tryptophan, which is an amino acid. So protein is very important for mental health, but it's also important for overall health as well. So on an occasional basis, it is okay. But if you're low on time, have some nuts at your desk. Have some fruit at your desk. An apple and a handful of nuts will probably give you more nutrients than a Huel, right? So, and it's not difficult to have some nuts and some fruit at your desk. Some full-fat Greek yogurt is not difficult to pop into a pot. A soup bought from a supermarket is going to be as quick and simple as chugging down a Huel. So I think the marketing behind Huel has been amazing.
I
think it is okay. I think Holland & Barrett, their biggest seller is one of the ready-made Huels at one of the airports in London.
Okay, interesting.
So if you're getting on a plane,
breakfast. The travel.
If you're getting on a plane, I think it's a great thing to have in your handbag for those emergencies where the only thing on offer is white baguettes with cheese and ham, and you are gluten intolerant or you are celiac, then perhaps something, I don't even know.
I see that actually, 5-hour flight where all you've got is what they might offer in flight menu, which, let's face it, is toasties or toasties.
Yeah, it's not great, is it?
Occasionally they do gluten-free bread, but not many. But like you say, the celiac, that kind of thing, isn't going to be catered for, and so you're having to bring your own food, which again, I said you'd have to buy it in the airport because it's liquid. You can't take it through security until they the rules on the literage. It's coming though, isn't it? I think July this year. No, maybe August. They're shifting the literage limit, I think. So that could be. So we may get people taking through different foods and drinks again. You never know. So, but it's a fair about. I love that you did a very fair, balanced, diplomatic answer to my question. It's the sort of thing I think when I first heard of Slim Fast, I rolled my eyes at and just went, "That's kind of a lazy solution
Yeah.
to a you know, for obviously for weight loss, it's a problem, so it's perceived as a problem, so therefore it is a slightly lazy solution to that. And also for me, just seemed like a very repetitive, uncomfortable, oh my god, I would get fed up with that really quickly type solution. And I think that may be my bias, my own principle. Actually, would I want to drink this stuff every day if it was, you know, designed for that? But is it actually designed if it's come from a dietitian? I couldn't see them advocating like every breakfast would be fuel, every lunch would be.
Exactly. And what comes to mind, actually, there's a neuroscientist he's a nutritional psychiatrist in America called Drew Ramsey. And I listened to a presentation of his once where he said, every time I eat, I look at the food and I think, is this food going to be feeding my brain? Yes or no? And a Huel every day is not going to be feeding your brain, because you're not going to be getting all of those great nutrients in their natural form in a way that your body can actually digest them and support your brain health. I can guarantee you there's not going to be any omega-3s in that Huel either. And that's a great source of omega-3 is very necessary for good brain health, brain function, and that cognitive function I was talking about earlier.
I would presume it's also lacking fiber.
Good question. Can't really answer that. A lot of people are bringing in things like chicory root to up the fiber content so that they can say, well, it's got fiber, so it's great for your gut microbiome. But you're making me want to actually bring up the ingredients list.
What's in it? Is there enough fiber? Will it keep you regular? All of that stuff. Yeah, no, I won't go too far into that. It's an interesting thing because, like you say, from a leader's perspective, when they're making those choices, I really love actually what you said. That what was his name again? The neuroscience psychologist. Drew Ramsey. What did you say he did? Sorry, my brain went at that point. See, I probably need to fuel it better. What was his credentials?
He is a nutritional psychiatrist.
That was it.
Nutritional
psychiatrist. Yes, absolutely. So that again, that brain food relationship.
Yeah.
Him before choosing food, is this going to? What a lovely question to ask. Is this going to feed my brain? Ordering off the menu, going out for dinner, is this going to feed my brain? It's not a case of don't have the thing you want, but maybe one of your courses, if you're having 3 courses, at least make one of your courses, this one will feed my brain. I don't see any reason not to make a choice like that. You can still enjoy great food.
Yes.
But it's got that variety of variability in it that
interesting. And when you start fueling your body in the correct way, you will have less desire to have the foods that are not great for your body. I mean, I've had a very long health journey myself. Mine started when I was 16 years old. So my diet is good these days. And something like a burger and chips or an ice cream just don't really float my boat anymore. I don't look at them and long for one, but it's because my body's got the nutrients that it needs from the foods that it needs. And I find if I don't have a meal with fruit and vegetables on the plate, to me, I don't feel like I've actually eaten, or my body does not feel satisfied.
Yeah, you're missing something.
Yeah.
And it's that habit, isn't it? I think actually since you and I started working together, I have noticed if we're out, if we go for dinner or something, I never want dessert. It just doesn't. I don't desire it. I look at the menu and go, oh well, I quite like that, but I don't want it right now.
Yeah.
Oh, I used to really like that, but I don't want it now. And that's really regular. That's really, really common. There are occasions when I'll go, oh, I really want that, and I'll have it because it's occasional. It's not I do that every time I go out type thing. I'm not craving the volume I used to crave. Clearly I'm fueling something in the right way, because I couldn't eat a whole pizza, for example. I can have a couple of slices and that's it, I'm done. Well, I've had enough, I don't want any more. So it's just kind of like you say, it is that conditioning almost, isn't it, to get into that habit. We've always got nuts in the cupboard, so a handful of nuts is very, very common in my day to day. And actually it wasn't quite so much, we've always had them. They'd be an emergency go-to rather than an everyday norm. It is really interesting, actually, the focus you have, and it's very time saving because nuts are super quick. You just packet of mixed nuts, some walnuts and some almonds and things in there. Massive difference. Massive difference. And
Yeah,
they do, when you're having hunger pangs, they do absolutely quell that. They squash it down. Quite, and it
absolutely.
doesn't
And
take many.
it's feeding your brain as well.
Mm,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Good. So, in a nutshell, leaders have a role
Talking
too.
about them.
What's the two top things leaders can do? One for themselves
Yep.
and one for their charges, the people they are responsible for, accountable to, looking after, and wanting to influence in the right way. So, what's the two things they can do? One for themselves and one for everybody else.
One for themselves would be to get curious about their own health. So to really listen to their bodies and really ask themselves the question, am I fueling myself in a way that's going to be supportive of my body health and my brain health today and in the future? And what can they do for others? Set an example by doing that and potentially help educate all of them on the importance of both physical and mental health from a why should we be fueling ourselves in the correct way? So educate themselves in that way, try and get an understanding of why we need to be eating and I say healthy, but I don't like the word healthy, eating a diet that is nutritious. There you go.
A nutritious diet. I like that. I
Yeah.
like that. And I think actually one of the big realizations, pretty something I've always known academically, but practically, I think actually as a learning from this, just our discussion today, is that fueling for the future, isn't it? It's not just fueling for now. Thinking about the future you're going to have and prepping that biddy body, getting your old biddy body ready so that it isn't going to let you down. It is going to enable you to go and, I don't know, hike that mountain or swim that sea or play that golf, run around after the grandkids, do what it is you want to do come retirement. When you've bought yourself that free time, you work really hard to get there.
Yeah.
How are you going to best enjoy it with a body that doesn't let you down because you haven't paid attention in the run up?
Yeah.
That for me is it's a very motivational in some ways to go, actually, yeah, that makes me want to ask those questions of myself.
Yeah. And I hope it is.
I hope it does something for our listeners as well. Okay, what could I do now that helps my biddy body in the future? How to be kind to my future self,
Yeah.
and get myself ready. That's really interesting. So obviously, I will always advocate for working with somebody once you do get curious, because let's face it, we won't have all the answers and we can read as many books as we like, but the interpretation is always different and difficult. So if you want to work with someone like Dana, and specifically if you want to work with Dana, how will you get hold of Dana? Dana, what are your contact details? We'll obviously put them in the show notes as well, but if you want to kind of just call them out now, that would be great.
Fabulous. Thank you so much. So I'm at dc-nutrition.co.uk is my website. Email address is simple. It's Dana at dc-nutrition.co.uk. And I'm on LinkedIn as well. So I'm sure the LinkedIn link will go in the show notes. And that's probably one of the platforms where I am most active.
Definitely. I will put that into the show notes for sure. And just to be really clear, you don't just work with individuals, do you? You do work with organizations to help them influence better health across their employee workforce. Is that right?
Yes, that is correct. I love the corporate space because I come from it. So I understand the pressures that people face within the corporate organization. But again, there's that missing piece of nutrition in how we look after our mental health specifically. Like I said in the beginning, we're talking a lot about the other stuff, the resilience, the sleep, and the stresses and the yoga and meditation, but we're not talking about gut health and how important that is for our mental health. And we're not talking about fueling bodies and brains in the correct way either.
Brilliant. So let's change that narrative then. It's not saying don't do yoga or meditation, it's going to add it to
Absolutely
good nutritional plan, right?
Yeah.
Good
Yeah.
stuff. Thank you so much, Dana. This is an absolute joy, as always. I always love talking to you. If you liked this, when you realize you really like this and you kind of have jotted down some things and thought, oh, I really need to pay attention to that, and I'm going to prepare my biddy body, do hit subscribe. There will be more episodes, not so much talking this topic, obviously, but talking all other areas of leadership and more. So thank you for listening, and I hope to have you join me again next time.